Welcome to Our Girl Relationships. We talk about the problems people face in their day-to-day lives. Let's start with the video.
So, I own a small business that supplies arts and crafts, raw materials to the artists. I started this all on my own in my second year of college, and it took a while for it to take off. At that time, I used my trust fund money to start the business, and when it looked like flying solo wouldn't get me anyway, I started looking for investors. The first person I told this was my dad at the time because he already ran his own business and has lived a comfortable life by it. So, of course, he was an inspiration and a role model for me. When I told him about it and showed him the sales of the first year, he was genuinely interested and told me he'd invest if I'm willing to take suggestions. We struck up a deal where I gave him 10% shares of my business because I didn't have anything else to put forward at the time. A few years down the road, I married my college boyfriend who worked as the manager of a company that produced packaged, ready to eat food, and his skills were great when it came to marketing and advertising. When he told me that he was thinking of quitting his job as he had already reached the highest post he was going to get at that particular company, I asked him what he was planning to do after that. His response took me by surprise because I didn't think he was interested in working for me. After we talked a lot about the situation, I wanted to make it clear to him that I'll be the boss, and I don't think it's a good idea for his ego to always take orders from him because professionally, I will treat him as someone working under me. But he was relentless and kept saying he isn't narrow minded or a masochist who can't accept women in a higher position than him. So eventually, he joined my business, first as the EO, and later on, he bought some shares of my company too. Initially, it was going well, and whenever we took decisions, we were able to always reach a compromise. But there was this one organization that wanted to tie up with us, but instead of a one time deal where they provide funds in exchange for us giving them exposure, they wanted to buy our shares. I wasn't comfortable with working with the CEO of their brand as he came across as a sketchy guy. It was just a feeling and not something I could point a finger at, but nevertheless, I trusted my gut. The problem was that my husband couldn't move past how great their deal was. They were offering us $700,000 for something that was worth $400,000 at its best. It was by no means something I should pass over a gut feeling, but I was still hesitating, and I'd like to avoid doing business with people if we aren't on the same wavelength. But my husband, for the first time, went behind my back and made a deal with them by offering up a part of his shares of my business. When I found out, I felt betrayed. It was inconceivable that he'd go behind my back and do something like this when we haven't reached an agreement. The breach of trust in that one action was unavoidable, and my marriage also suffered from this. I regretted letting him in on the professional side of my life. But what was even more unfathomable was my dad's reaction. Of course, my father already knew about the back deal because he was a shareholder and was informed about all these things. But he didn't know how bad our marriage suffered, and when a few weeks later I told him we're going to be separated, he took my husband's side and asked me to get back together with him. He said these things happen in businesses, and even if I break up my marriage, I wouldn't be able to get rid of my husband because he owns a part of my business. He also said that I should stop worrying because if anything like this happens again, he's going to personally reinsure me for the damages. He said his own business was flourishing and he is capable of taking a hit if something goes south. So I trusted his words and tried to work things out with my husband. It took a lot of time, but eventually we were able to reach a ground where we existed without getting on each other's nerves. Now it's been 6 years, and last week I received a letter from Dad that included a note and a check. The check was for $600,000, and the note said that he has sold his business because it was taking a hit from the pandemic, and if he is too old to worry about how it'll be able to survive. That's why he sold everything to his partner and is out of it. The check was a part of the money he received when his partner bought over his part of the company. The reason he was sending me the check was because he feels bad about not letting me know in advance about his decision, even though he promised that if my company suffers because of my husband, he is going to make sure that I don't have to reimburse the losses by myself. But now he wouldn't be able to hold his end of the deal. I can't believe him. He was my backup, the one person I trusted completely. I can't explain to you how much this affects my business because that would require a lot of intricate explanations, but it's really bad. I know that from his point of view, he isn't wrong, but I can't help and think about what's going to happen to me. Also, his note said that he isn't worried about his retired life because his shares from my business would get him enough in royalties that he'll be able to live without needing help from anyone else. But I'm really pissed at him. He made me take back my husband and let him stay in the business, and now he's pulling out. I am so mad that I'm thinking about cutting him off completely. It's not entirely impossible, and if I talk to my legal advisor, I'm sure we can come up with a plan. But would that make me an a-hole, seeing how he gave me a huge check from his retirement money and said his part in my business is his backup? I know a lot of you think I'm just being petty and that I brought it upon myself by letting my husband stay in the business after what he did. Trust me when I say that I regret that decision the most, but also I've had enough of playing on other people's terms, and if I want to ensure the future of my business without any unforeseen hiccups, I'll have to take matters in my own hands and cut all ties professionally and personally if it's a danger to me in any way. That's why I asked my legal team to have a meeting and we discussed what we can do to make sure that I hold the major power and that we could kick out my husband from his current status in the company. Now, because of the sensitivity of the information that we discussed, I can't type everything here, but I'll make sure to leave an update after it's done. Also, I've decided to not take out my anger on my dad and not cut him off. The pandemic is hard for everyone, and a lot of the businesses went under because of it. He did what he thought was the right thing to do, and I can't blame him for that when I would have done the same thing if I was in his shoes. It's been months since I checked in with you guys, and it wasn't by choice. My life has been crazy lately in all fronts, and I keep getting one shock after the other. So I was able to convince the shareholders to buy out my husband, and I told him that he needs to go out quietly. It wasn't really that hard because I have come to know a lot of the shady ways he does business, and from the day he went behind my back to strike up that deal, I was stepping on water around him. I made an entire folder that was dedicated to all his mess ups over the last 6 years. And if I were to go to court with all that, he'll actually be forced to pay a lot of damages, especially because the client he brought it from was caught up in a money laundering business, and I had proof that my husband was involved in it. Although it was purely accidental that he got caught up, if it's to my advantage, I'm going to use it. So I forced my husband out of the business and he went to my dad. He really thought that my dad was going to take up his side again. Too bad for him, I have already talked to him too, and he knew all too well that if my dad took his side, my dad would lose his shares in my business too. After that, it was just a battle between me and my husband, and even though professionally I won, I lost a lot too. My husband didn't take what I did quietly and filed for divorce. I had no interest in staying with him, so I wanted to go for a mutual divorce. But he was adamant about taking spousal support now that he's jobless and was also demanding that I give up the house over to him. I wasn't about to agree to that, and even he knows I wouldn't reveal the material I used to blackmail him for a simple divorce, as it'll cost way more money than I'll ever pay for a settlement. So he filed a divorce case, which I'm in the middle of. That's why it's been too exhausting lately. Finally, I can take a deep breath. It's been barely 6 months, but it feels like I've aged a decade. My divorce was finalized last week and it was settled that I'll give him spousal support until my husband finds a new job. He also got the house, but I was 2 moves ahead of him. I was petty to the end, and when it looked like I'm going to lose, I sold most of our stuff and kept the cash. The TV, the microwave, his PlayStation, the stereo system, the furniture, and even our bed. I've sold everything through a dealer, and there's no way he could prove how much I sold it all. At least now I'll have the satisfaction of knowing he's going to suffer a little in that big house he'll be living alone in. NTA, I don't think you're an a-hole for getting mad at your husband, but I do think you're an a-hole for trying to make your dad pay for what your husband did. NTA, you're not an a-hole, but you're definitely a doormat. You should grow a spine and kick out your husband, and if I were you, I'd get rid of the dad too, as he's obviously in league with your husband. I, 28 female, just recently got engaged to my 29-year-old fiancé, male. For background, I'm originally from the UK. I moved to the US for college when I was 20 and have lived here since. Shortly after I moved to the US, my mother took very ill. She was critical in hospital for a very long time, and now she is at home and my father is her primary carer. My mother cannot fly due to her condition or travel for any prolonged periods of time due to pain and the large amounts of equipment she requires. My fiance is aware of this, and we have visited the UK multiple times since we first got together when we were 22. Now, onto the issue. We recently got engaged and had breakfast with his parents. They mentioned that we should get married at the same venue as they did about 30 plus years ago. My fiance said that's a great idea. I didn't want to cause an issue and wanted to speak with him privately, so I just said we should look at all our options, make sure everything fits with our needs and plans. Once we were home, I raised the topic. I said, he's aware my mother cannot travel and certainly not to the US, and my father is her carer, so he can't leave her. As such, I was hoping we would have the wedding in the UK. His family are well situated and could afford it, but a few of his cousins and a few friends may find it a bit expensive. When I raised this, I suggested we have a smaller wedding in the UK and help with contribution towards everyone's flights and accommodation costs. We have a decent wedding budget and could still have a lovely wedding in the UK. One of my closest friends and bridesmaid works for an airline and has mentioned previously she could get great large booking rates and discounts, and she has since said that she would be more than willing to help. My fiance thinks it's too much of a faff to get all our friends and his relatives to the UK, and that my parents will understand not being able to attend. I don't have anyone else. I'm an only child and my grandparents are gone. I told him I can't imagine getting married if my parents couldn't be there, that I want my dad to walk me down the aisle, and that everything my mom has been through, she deserves to see her only child on her wedding day. He called me an a-hole, saying I'm being selfish and only thinking of my wants, and his parents have since agreed. He said, so we wouldn't get married if your mom was dead. I told him there is a difference between deceased and disabled and ended the conversation there. My MOH is completely on my side and understands why I want my parents there, but one of my bridesmaids had said that I am the a-hole for forcing everyone else to travel and spend additional money for the sake of 2 people. I feel like maybe I am the a-hole for making plans around 2 people, but they are my parents and I'm just trying to find a compromise. AITA? For a little humor, because this is just depressing, his grandmother, who I adore, is completely on my side because she wants to get herself an English boyfriend. NTA, don't marry this guy. He accuses you of only caring about your family while also telling you that only his family needs to be at the wedding. And his parents back him up? I can only imagine how they'll behave if and when children enter the picture. The kids don't need to travel to the UK. They have grandparents here. Just wow. No, you are very definitely NTA. You are the bride. You have just your parents. You certainly deserve for them to be there on your wedding day. The wow is surprised at the absolute insensitivity of your fiancé. He's being an AH in how he's behaving towards you and just talking about this issue. As an old married person, this does not bode well for future discussions and compromises between the two of you. It's concerning. Doesn't help that his parents are rude about it too. My solution, if he settles down from the petulant teenager, would be to have a small wedding in the UK for those who are willing and able to travel. Then a reception at your in-laws' location. But that's if fiancé decides to be an adult about it. Apologies for the nasty, and he promises to be better. Otherwise, run. He's showing you the ugly inside that you'd be married to. I'm currently expecting my first child. I don't live close to my mom or her family, so we have a group chat going where I keep them updated on my pregnancy since I am not on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I had asked them not to share anything. Then my stepfather makes a post on Facebook announcing he's going to be a grandpa, that his baby girl is expecting, and shares not only the ultrasound photo, but also the name we have chosen for our baby. A friend of mine on Facebook told me about the post and shared a screenshot with me. I called him up and asked him what the hell he was thinking and how dare he do it when we had explicitly stated not to. He told me he was sorry and that he had let excitement get to him. Then he told me I should be happy because baby is going to be loved and has their grandparents all present and excited for them. I saw red because my dad died several years ago. So no, my baby will not have all their grandparents in their life. They are missing the one who would probably have been the best. I told him he was being insensitive and I needed to end the call before I said something I would regret. The next day he sent me a text apologizing again and saying we should be closer now than ever, and he feels like I am taking stuff out on him that is not his fault. A few hours after that, he called and told me I wouldn't have reacted as badly if Mom had shared. I told him I would still be mad, but he especially had no right to share, that he is not my father, that he did everything he could to make my dad's life hell before he died, and that I would always blame him for my dad's more sudden death. The BG on that is my dad started suffering from a number of health complications about 2 months after my mom remarried. My stepfather tried to get dad to surrender custody and just visit, but let him take over being the dad to me. Dad refused and continued being an active participant in my life. Stepfather continued trying to take over the role. Then he told my dad he would adopt me once he was gone, so I would always have a dad. Dad was still alive and still able to do stuff with me, and here was this guy who already tried to get him out of the picture, telling him he would take his place. Dad didn't make it too long after that. He went down rapidly. My stepfather was never shy about the stuff he was saying, so I always knew. The adoption never happened. I spoke to the judge and said I would never want my stepfather to be my father. I never called him Dad, never loved him or said I love you to him. I have never hugged him. I have never ever celebrated or honored him for Father's Day. So when I told him that he especially had no right and that I did blame him for how my dad died, he told me I was being unfair. He told me how cold it was, that he has been in my life for 22 years now, and I should embrace him and give my child the gift of a loving grandparent. My mom then called after and told me it was mean to tell him he had no right, as though he were a stranger. AITA? NTA, and even without the added layer of him trying to replace your dad when your dad was still present in your life. It would be a terrible thing to do. You don't announce somebody's pregnancy before they get to share their news, and you don't share details they trusted you with but don't want shared. You would be absolutely right to be angry with anyone doing this. NTA, it wouldn't matter if he was your birth parent, he still violated your trust by posting. As it is, this is just a continuation of him placing his own wants above you. He didn't care that you loved your dad. He didn't care that he hurt you by hurting your dad. He didn't care that you didn't want to be adopted. And now he doesn't care what you want for your child either. It seems like he cares more about you and your child being a prop in his life to make him seem like such a great stepdad, grandpa, than he actually cares about you and your feelings.